I welcome everyone for this panel discussion on the evolution of the digital banking landscape. Before I introduce our expert panel today, I'd just like to give a brief introduction to the topic and how this session will be conducted. When we talk about the evolution of digital banking, it's first good to establish what we all mean by digital banking. And it's common, we've heard common definitions around digital banking to be the ability to do any financial transaction digitally. That I feel has been a common mistake in trying to focus only on the digitization of existing processes and services. So if you look at this aspect only, examples of digitization is things like if you want to open an account, how can you do it digitally without having to physically visit a branch or to fill out physical forms. Another example would be if you want to make a payment, how can you do it in the most frictionless way using digital medium? Or if you want to be more literate about your financial position, how can you do it digitally? So these are some of the examples as to how digitization affects, providing existing products and processes and services through digital means. But that's not all. Digital banking also means using technology to solve our lifestyle issues that include a financial aspect to it. So for example, if I'm building a house, then digital banking for that would be to help me figure out using technology the best way to fund my house building and not just to apply for the loan in a digital format, but take me through that entire process of figuring out the investment, finding my unique financial position in the next couple of years, figuring out what banks and what bank real estate partnerships make sense to me, and then going through all that. And finally, as a last step, applying for the loan online and getting started. So digital banking means all of this, both providing digital means to existing processes, but also innovating through digital media. So this is the type of digital banking that consumers are pushing for. But what we see globally from the offerings of banks is quite a far cry from that. And today we will discuss how we see this developing in South Asia, specifically in Sri Lanka, and what unique features and challenges make our regional progress towards digital banking interesting or alarming. So that's the topic we're going to talk about. And let me now very quickly introduce the presenters. I'm Seshika Fernando. I serve as the Vice President and Head of the Banking, Financial Services and Insurance Practice at WSO2, which is an integration company. And I'm responsible for crafting technology solutions to best suit the needs of the BFSI sector. And I will be the moderator of this session. We are honored to have on this panel Mr. Parag. He's the country head for payments, consumer finance, digital banking and marketing for HDFC Bank Limited, India. Under his leadership and vast knowledge and understanding of technology, as well as experience in the payments business, HDFC Bank has grown to become a market leader in the payments business in India and has retained that position over the last several years. Mr. Rao counts over 27 years of experience in the financial services industry, and we are honored to have him participate and give us his insights on this topic. We also have from the banking sector, Mr. Ruwan Bakmedeniya, who is the Chief Information Officer of Bank of Ceylon, the largest bank in Sri Lanka. He counts over 25 years of diverse experience in banking, financial services and insurance, and has worked in both multinational as well as multicultural work environments, locally as well as internationally. He has previously held multiple senior corporate management positions in other large banks in Sri Lanka, as well as technology companies. We also have the great pleasure of having someone from the regulatory side of things to give us a different insight to this topic. Mr. Dharmasri Kumaratunga is the Director of Payments and Settlements at the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. He has more than 30 years experience in central banking and has worked in several departments within the central bank, including economic research and information technology. He holds very important positions in various councils and alliances, such as the SARC Payment Council, the Asian Clearing Union, the SWIFT Alliance, the Lanka Financial Services Bureau, and many more. He is also the secretary of the National Payment Council, which is the highest decision-making body of the payment system of Sri Lanka. So one of the best people from the regulatory point of view to provide his perspectives on this topic. And then, of course, we have Mr. Channa De Silva joining us, a very well-known ICT industry veteran in Sri Lanka. He has been serving as the General Manager and Chief Executive Officer of Lanka Clear since 2015. He also counts over 24 years of experience, including a spectrum of industries, including multinational as well as local organizations. A little bit about Lanka Clear for those of you, I'm sure it's known by everyone, but just to create awareness, Lanka Clear has spearheaded the implementation of a variety of payment innovations in Sri Lanka over the past 2 decades. And a number of these payment solutions are pioneering initiatives in the South Asia region. So therefore, Mr. De Silva brings a very valuable and different perspective to our conversation today. Right, so that's us. And just before we start with the questions, I would just like to make a couple of comments around housekeeping of the session. The objective of this discussion is to basically discuss this topic involving everyone in the session, and that includes myself, the panelists, as well as everyone joining us. So please take active engagement, be actively involved, and please feel free to send in your questions. And I'll make sure to get as many of them answered in the session. And to the panelists as well, don't wait for your turn. If you want to add on to another panelist's response, or to disagree, or to give a different perspective, just go ahead and let's make it very interactive. All right, so with all of that, I think I've spoken enough. I'd like to get the insights of the experts we have today. So I'd like to start this session on the first step of digital banking, which I mentioned around digitization of existing processes and services. And around this, Mr. Rao, this first question is to you. Now, actually, I want to show you an interesting infographic at this point. Show this. Right. So what I have here is a very good capture of the different generations that are in operation today within the banking consumer population. So we have the maturists who are born pre-1945, the baby boomers between 45 and 60, and then of course the Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, who very commonly get classified as the millennials. And I don't expect you to read all of this, but generally what this very smart graphic from Barclays really denotes is that a large portion of these generations are digital first. Either they are digital immigrants, or they're digital natives, or they are, from the baby boomer or maturist generations, but getting involved in technology. I'll take my dad, for example. He's 77, but I would say he's quite digitally savvy compared to going by the requests he makes on a day-to-day basis. And I kind of took the trouble to kind of find the population metrics and kind of come up with this percentage as well. So if you take just the millennials, it's 86% of the banking consumer base today, right? And 13% from the older generations. So clearly this means that a majority of today's banking consumer population prefer digital channels. Along these lines, Mr. Rao, I'd like to understand your views on where you see the status of digitization. And before you answer, let me just set the context. Now, globally, various countries provide these digitized banking processes in various degrees. And many of the more developed economies would allow consumers to, for example, open any type of account digitally without any manual intervention. And then, of course, there's a range of these functionalities spread across different regions. So where do you see the status of digitization in the South Asian region? And what are you satisfied with what you're seeing?
Thank you for the infographics. I think good start off. And I'll start off with the point which you made about digital banking, not just being about existing processes or digitizing existing, but also looking at something what there are various terms which we call, or I choose to call it digital banking on the edge. Okay, there are two parts, two facets to it. Now, if I were to zoom back to the infographics which you showed and this whole Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, baby boomers, etc., etc. Fact of the matter is that if you look at it as into two broad parts, okay, the baby boomers and the upper part, the elderly amongst the Gen X, if you may call so, these are the guys who have money. They are the people who have wealth. Okay, these are also the people who are reasonably well banked, and I'm talking right now of say urban populations, well banked. So these people are banking savvy. They understand banking products, techniques. They're well up the curve in terms of maturity and including even in their life cycles. And so the needs of these people are different. Okay, and then I'll come to the others later. For these people, a lot of focus of the banks, and like you said, a large portion of these people are also already banking. Here, this whole area or domain of digitizing existing processes of the bank, I think becomes extremely important, because here, you're not just talking about incremental acquisition of new customers, you're also talking of deepening relationships, because these are the people who also give you the profits. Okay, so digitization of existing processes to make them more efficient, to make the customer experience far more easier, to make me as a customer who has say a 3 product holding to become a 4 and a 5 product holding, and thereby make my experience that much more easier, simpler. Okay, I think it is of extreme importance. These are the people, like I said, who have wealth, and this is where the pool of profit which banks will necessarily need to focus on. Specifically to banks who are medium and large scale, any which way, these are customers, they form a large chunk of the transactions, and these are the people who bring about a lot of the stability to the banking sector, and hence digitization of existing processes, extremely important part of the digital strategy of most banks. Okay, I leave it at that for a minute. Moving to the next set, the Gen Y, the Gen Z. These are tomorrow's customers. These are people who are either have already just about set the foot into the working life. Working life could be salaried, they could be self-employed. Okay, or people who are in their late teens, early 20s, etc., who are about to embark on a journey wherein they start acquiring financial assets and grow. These people are a little more evolved. They're a little more evolved. They're a little relatively lesser banked, but these are the people who are your future customers. They're much more tech savvy. They're much more digital savvy. A larger number of their day-to-day transactions, I don't mean just financial transactions, but any transactions, information seeking, chatting, messaging, communication, everything, a lot of it is digital. And within that digital, you can say a lot of it is mobile driven. Here, if you need to target customers, this set of customers, and these are the customers of the future, you need two things. One is obviously you need to adopt to the platforms which these consumers are sort of used to. Typically, in this case, it's the mobile or the tablet. That's where these people transact. The needs of these customers are slightly different. They have ample choice. They have access to information very easily. Okay, and so the philosophy, your product philosophy, or the way to attract those customers are going to be completely different. You also have to look at these customers as investments for the future, because these people typically, in my experience, I've seen, They start with transaction products. Typically, these are the people who are adventurous, who would like to try out different payment forms of, and so therefore, for many of these customers, the first entry into financial services is through payments, making payments through wallets, making payments through, transfers of money, etc., buying, consumption. That's their thing. And so therefore, banks, traditional banks and everything would need to really focus on that aspect of financial services as opposed to merely just opening accounts or giving a loan, or talking of trading accounts, or such kind. You've got to look at payments as a way in which you're going to attract this set of customers, get them on board, okay, and then slowly sort of take them up the financial services curve. That's where this whole new aspect of looking at incrementally new products which are purely digital, looking at ways and means and processes in which you got to build your architecture to attract customers of these kinds. Here is another area where banks or financial institutions, I don't think, in my view, alone can sort of compete with the kind of the mind share of these kind of customers. Co-optation, partnerships, alliances with fintechs, with aggregators, with other payment service providers, I think is becoming the need of the game. Fundamentally, to create differential products which may not be used by the earlier set of customers I talked about, but products to attract them, bring them onto a transaction platform, get them engaged onto your platform, and slowly sort of upsell them, if you may call so, to use a banking word, upsell them and bring them into the larger financial services category. So banks will have to actually adopt two approaches, um, and sort of target this set of customers. One for existing customers who give them their today's profit, but the second, equally important, for tomorrow's future customers who are going to ensure the longevity of that financial institution. I leave it here right now. I'm sure there's a lot more questions which will come out of that, but I leave it here right now. These are my views on the topic which you raised. Thank
Sure.
you.
But very quickly, Mr. Rao, I just want to understand how satisfied are you of the steps the banks in the region have taken? And when I mean the region, I mean the South Asian region. And I suppose there's a big divide between, your economy, which is the largest economy in the region, as well as the smaller countries. But that doesn't really define the capability to innovate. But what are your thoughts on the steps that currently have been taken along those two lines that you mentioned?
Okay. Okay, let me put it immediate off the cuff. I think the status of, and I talk again specifically of the BFSI sector as opposed to the fintech sector. So BFSI, I think progress is a mixed bag. There are pockets of some institutions who have made good, decent progress in terms of digitizing existing processes and looking at partnerships. And there are, I think, laggards, clearly laggards. And to that extent, I think there's a long way to go. Is the environment, I think, conducive to the way? Well, I think we've got, I think the traditional financial sector, I think, has its own challenges. Couple of the challenges which I'd like to sort of talk about is exact thing. If you're a medium to large bank, okay, you're built on legacy systems. You have a traditional way of banking. Okay, how are you going to question that? How do you, what are the options available in front of you? Do you discard the old bank and start looking at something new? Do you try to make them coexist together? How are you going to do? How are you going to manage that change? You've got the same set of your banking employees, your IT tech professionals, your operational, your front end. How are you going to sort of make that change? How are you going to bring about that kind of, so there are a lot of changes which are internal to the bank. Okay, I'm not too sure whether many people have even sort of been able to think through what is their digital strategy, covering existing bank and looking at
Yeah.
new customers.
Yeah.
That's one area I think banks need to look at. The other area I think we look at is the ecosystem capability to build up.
Yeah.
Example, the way I look at it, banks have tremendous strengths. You have tremendous strengths in reaching out to consumers, not from the liability franchise, but also from a lending franchise. Do you have the capability, do you have the digital capability to draw in data, not from your own self, but even external sources, to be able to say suitably underwrite? How do you bring that ecosystem play to be able to enable
And we,
financial
and
institutions
we
to go
will be
beyond?
coming to that more in more detail later as well.
Okay. So, okay, to summarize that, I think it's a mixed bag. The journey has started. Okay, it's going to take quite
Wow.
some time for banks to do, but it will involve change, of a seminal nature. Sometimes that pain can be sort of painful. In the interim or in during that time, there will always be this debate which is floating out in the air. Are the fintechs going to disrupt banks? How is that thinking? So that debate, I think, will be out for all of us to sort of debate about. But it's a journey, and I think the positive side is that the entire ecosystem is understanding that it's a journey which everyone needs to embark on.
Yeah.
Not just the banking sector, I think even the regulators involved are very clearly understanding that they've got to have a different way, a differential way of looking at the new digital world, keeping into account the core role of the regulator and the core role of banks in the
Yeah.
whole in the whole of managing the wealth of uh, of, so it's a mixed bag, I think.
Right. Thank you very much for those introductory views. Mr. Bakmedeniya, I'm going to come to you next for a more Sri Lankan context. Now, along these lines of digitizing existing processes, the global pandemic really fast-tracked the need for this transition and pushed organizations in every industry to rethink their strategies, to remodel their distribution channels, and basically offer much more digital alternatives in light of discouraging face-to-face interaction. If I give you a very quick example, something that has always annoyed me is that my daughter was born in the midst of the COVID lockdown last year. So I had been going for hospital visits every month, and something that has really annoyed me, being a busy woman as well, is that you had to wait in queue for the doctor, and there's no way of finding out what the current number is, at least in Sri Lanka. So that we can nicely kind of schedule ourselves around that and get there on time. But come COVID, immediately afterwards, this was made available by many of the hospitals in Sri Lanka, where they kind of freely gave this information on a very quick web link to avoid people overcrowding the facility. Similarly, my question to you is, what major changes have local banks adopted to completely revamp our processes and offer much more efficient services that saves time for both the consumer as well as the bank in light of this new normal?
I think a very relevant question, and I think there's a lot to talk around that. And I'll just pick it up from where Rao started off, right? So I think banks are being challenged well before the COVID by the non-financial sector as well as the fintechs, who are trying to give more and more financial services and services to customers who are essentially the banking customers, right? So all the banks are kind of struggling through and trying to pick up the bits and pieces and trying to get into the digitalization process, right? So banks are big, and obviously, like tradition, you have the legacy systems, you have some of the systems, the processes, the compliance, everything comes into play. Whilst there's a majority or there's a major need of going digital and catering your Gen X to Z, right? But so everything was on theory, and there were a lot of hype about it. People are talking about it, but I think it's bad that COVID happened, but it also gave us an opportunity, right? I mean, that's your classic example that you told about getting hospital, queues, the appropriate time actually happened probably due to the current situation that we all faced in. If not, this would have come probably in another couple of years. So likewise, I think from a bank standpoint, I think all banks in Sri Lanka at their level best, they were trying to digitally engage with their customers in many ways. As a community of bankers, I don't think the banks actually stopped their operation. They kept their banks open, their branches open, their services open. We saw significant increments in our digital transactions, both remittances, our IPGs, our internet-based banking products, actually were quite adopted. And I believe some of the countrywide statistics also probably Mr. Kumaratunga will kind of allude to this, were going really up. So this gave us an opportunity to kind of refocus and adopt things fairly fast. reprioritize some of these services fairly fast, make some of the decisions that were lagging for a longer time to just justify the process of the need of digitalization, need of customer centricity, need of how to create that omni-channel experience to customers by giving simple solutions. I think my starting points are, yes, it's a great opportunity that created where banks had the chance of moving ahead on the digital path. Yes, having said that, there's a lot more to be done and lot more to be actually get it executed at the ground level at this point of time.
So and understandably these things take time, and you can't
Sure.
have a kind of a digital banking
overnight
project overnight just because COVID hit. But has this whole pandemic worked as an impetus for banks to start their digital strategies at least?
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. So that like I said, so it gave us the opportunity for both technology, for business to really rethink on this opportunity to kind of really come out with some new products, services, and etc. And also, it also gave an opportunity for the customers to get the flavor of what is available at this point of time, because things were happening through that, right? But they were also coming on board through that. So now, with newer services coming into the future, I'm sure this will help us for them to kind of be more adaptive, much more faster.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Bakmedeniya. Right. Now you mentioned Mr. Kumaratunga in your comments, so I'm going to come to Mr. Kumaratunga next. Mr. Kumaratunga, basically, obviously, I'm expecting a different perspective from you. Now, we actually do see banks taking on various projects and introducing various digital services that are, often advertised on various media that we see. But when we consider the point of view of a regulator, some of the main objectives of the regulator are to protect the consumer, obviously, then to disrupt monopolies and improve competition, then to boost the economy, and so on. And obviously, digital banking plays a key role in all of these aspects and can influence all of these aspects. So as a regulator, we have also seen the central bank initiating many projects around really pushing the banks towards digitization. And I'm sure if I ask you, you will definitely provide me a long list of initiatives that the central bank has started around this. But my question to you is slightly different. My question is, what out of these initiatives that the central bank has undertaken have made a serious and real impact, and where have we seen real adoption from a large segment of our population? Mr. Kumar.
Thank you, Shashika. Yeah, thank you. And first of all, I want to thank FITIS for organizing this the important session commemorating Sri Lanka Internet Day. And this is a commendable efforts as it is a high time to initiate such a discussion and revisit the Sri Lanka journey of digital banking. And as we can see all around all the banking sector experience a major transformation has happened last few years with adopting new banking technologies to keep up to date with the new demand and the requirements of the public. In some cases, some scenarios with the CBSL, Central Bank of Sri Lanka, and also the Lanka Clear has initiated many digital banking product in the last few years, as you mentioned in the first stage. And most of these banking products are adopted by most of the banks. And when you're comparing 2019 to 20, internet and mobile banking grew by 56% in Sri Lanka, indicating that people and business are adopting new tools and facilitating as a fast pace. Then past a few decades, we have seen customers become more knowledgeable. And as a result, their expectation and demands are evolving fast. Even though they need some of the products from the banks, in some cases, the banks cannot fulfill all the requirement of what the customers are expected. And the financial institution must always stay one step ahead to meet these challenges or the demand expecting from the customers. So that is what I can say. And when you're thinking of the banking sector in their progress and joining hands with the central bank and also with the Lanka Clear, so we have, I think, initiated new initiatives in the last few years, and bank also have actively participated in different committees appointed by the CBSL and still in the National Council, as I said earlier, and knowledge to advance Sri Lanka banking sector in line with the global developments and provide the maximum benefit to the customers. On the other hand, journey to the digitalization of the banking is never smooth one of any country. So there are many in some key regulatory aspect, implementation, and with the COVID situation, there are barriers we face in some of the apps, and promised the date they cannot launch the development of the apps. So there are many barriers that have taken place, and with this digital journey. So we have also noticed some delays in adapting these structures to provide their best to the customers. And digital banking is a very broad and holistic concept, as you explained early stage. And we know that in some cases, in some banks, digital banking is that implementing of this ATM. And in my idea, I think ATM is if we see some of the banks' website, digital banking, you can see that ATM is also there, but it is a cash. Again, come to the cash into the people's hand. Then we are not encouraging to do that one. And the way Sri Lanka banking industry or the sector has historically worked is to allow the industry to respond to the changes and regulator to intervene when needed. And whenever necessary, that regulator is always intervene and giving now push to all the banking sector to take the initiatives or introduce a new technology for the products. And we have also had instances where the CBSL has directly intervened and give some new solutions to the technology for the, especially for the convenience for the public. And in the banking sector, when we started for this CCAP project in 2013 from the Lanka Clear, and first introduced this cash environment, and so the common ATM switch, and any card can be used in the other ATM. Then at the mindset of the bank at that time, earlier stage that they don't share their ATM with the others. But later they realized that importance of sharing this ATM, and any banks it's not necessary to have the 2-3 ATM in the one place. The early concept is that quite different now. At the latest stage, they understood that the importance of having the common ATM switch introduced by this Lanka Clear. And SEP scenario is also same, common electronic fund transfer switch. What I've seen is that even though we started in 2015 in common electronic fund transfer system, and CBSL has given the maximum limit for the SEP is 5 million. In 2015, 5 million. I think in 2021, it has to be increased 10 million now. But thing is that customer can transfer using their web application or the internet facilities. In some cases, it is 100,000. Even though we have allowed 5 million, the banks are not using that facility. So it will directly impact for the customers, especially I think corporate customers. Yeah, I think doing this fund transfer largely, in that case, they have to come for the RTGS system. So that is a high cost for the customers. And so the early adaptation in this the SEPT, I think 2015 only 8 banks joined, but later in 2018 all 36 banks joined. Now it is 42 banks joined after the CBSL and also Lanka. I think China can remember that I think in some cases every week we are having a meeting with the banks to push this to adaptation of this SEPT facility. So in addition to that, QR code is also the same, that even the 2018 we have introduced QR code, Lanka QR, in 2018 October. Then at that time, very few institutions are engage in this one and onboarded this, or the adaptation is very low. Then after we mandated for the all the, so that's a now all the regular institutions, telcos also join. So anyway, it is after mandated now the or pushing by the CBSL or the and with the Lanka Clear. And I will take this opportunity to suggest the bank should proactively engage in this line of the development, and maybe needed to adjust their policies to support and join hand with the other stakeholders, like Ruwan said that with the, in some cases, fintech companies, to join hand with them and achieve their initiatives. And one more example I want to make is that with that global, one example I will say about the Just Pay also in this, I think the channel will also, I think earlier we had the long discussion on the Just Pay. The early stage of Just Pay is that we give the limit 10,000 and later and 50,000 rupees. This is a maximum. The central bank is saying that this is a maximum limit is 50,000. But some banks are not using, they are thinking that maximum is 50,000. Then we are giving their own customers only for the 30,000 or 25,000. So that is not fair. In some banks are giving, some financial institutions are giving, non-bank financial institutions are giving 50,000, but the major banks are not allowed for the customers to do their transaction 50,000. So there's a major barrier for the customer. And our side, we have given our opportunity for the banking sector to develop these things, but they are not. I think they are adopting the digital, but limitations are there. So thank you. And the first stage, so we'll have another discussion on that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. De Silva, I now come over to you to provide some feedback from a financial payments perspective. And it's a very different question I'm going to pose to you. I want to understand why our fintech ecosystem is currently the size it is and not as vibrant as we would like it to be. I think in Sri Lanka, we have some of the best technology talent coming out of our universities. We have some of the largest technology companies that are providing technology to very important, global customers over here. And we have a very strong financial services ecosystem with a very strong regulatory regime as well. But a large majority of innovation through fintech we see is mostly around payments and variations of the same thing. I think there was one of these advertisements around the Lanka QR code, which hinted at this very well. There was a fruit vendor in that advertisement who says to the customer, whether you have this pay, that pay, or any other pay, I accept because I have Lanka QR code. So I think that really hints at what's happening here. And I think obviously Lanka Pay has played a major role in enabling and empowering fintechs to innovate on payments. But my question really is, why hasn't fintech innovation taken off the ground beyond payments? What do you see as I'm sure you have interacted with a large number of this fintech ecosystem, as well as the regulatory channels? What are the main challenges and stumbling blocks that are impeding this vibrancy in the fintech ecosystem? Is it the banks? Is it the regulatory environment? Is it a lack of investment? Or is it something else?
Yeah, thanks, Ashika. I think I would like to pick on what Mr. Rao was saying. He was talking about the old customers and the new customers. Because I would like to look at it from a new customer perspective, because this is the younger generation. Actually, they are influencers of the older generation. So if we get the younger generation in, they will influence their parents, the grandparents, to adopt this new technology. That is actually how the technology is moving. That's how we have seen. I mean, if you even look at social media, it's the kids who are actually teaching the elder. So even the financial transaction, we see that is happening, worldwide. So to answer your question, actually, it's twofold. One is obviously, I think in time to come, I think Mr. Kumaratunga touched upon it. There was a lot of resistance from the banking community to support this, right? And I remember some of the fintechs coming to us and saying, I went to this bank and I wasted 2 years, and can you introduce me to a bank who's very progressive? So we have been sort of shopping around in terms of introducing them to different banks to get them on board. I mean, just for payment's sake. I mean, payments is only a minor transaction of a whole ecosystem, right? So I think that is a fundamental. So if you can't get the payments going, then all of the other work that is being done to provide digital services cannot be fulfilled, because obviously you have to make a payment. So I think we have had a lot of issues, but I think now the banks are coming around, especially with the COVID, and they are providing, as Mr. Kumaratunga said, there are limits and other issues that are coming up. So hopefully with time we'll solve that. But I would like to point on a different aspect. We have always been pointing a finger. So I don't think there's any regulatory barrier. I mean, I don't believe that, right? In that sense, regulator has been very progressive. But from a fintech perspective, are they actually looking at providing services other than payments, right? Because what we are saying is, for example, I would like to, general example I take is PickMe, right? And PickMe is not a payment app, right?
Yeah.
PickMe is a consumer app who's providing a service of going from A to B, right? And I'm not downloading PickMe to make a payment to the three-wheeler guy.
Exactly.
It's a service that I consume, and payment is only a byproduct of that. So what a lot of all this fintech, so-called fintech, community is thinking payment. So I'm asking them, what is the difference between payment app A, B, and C? What is your value proposition? What is your USP against somebody else? Why should I get A versus B, right? So I think the way they need to look at, I think they need to completely change their perspective of providing a service, right? And if you provide a service, a payment will follow behind that. And we have actually the payment rails to support that. The Lanka QR, the JustPays, and all these payment rails are there. As long as the fintechs come up with these services which the consumers consume, they would naturally do a payment behind that, right? And they would be comfortable. For example, the classic example I give is we use WhatsApp, extensively, right? And we trust WhatsApp with our confidential information. And when WhatsApp went into WhatsApp Pay, we are so comfortable in our confidential information, we are comfortable in making a payment through WhatsApp. So because we trust the app, right? So always, I think what the new generation is looking at is not really banking or payment services. They want to consume digital services. And if you provide services which are adopted by consumers, then naturally payments will flow behind that. Because I think we need to change our line of thinking. Payment is not the problem, actually. I can even pay with cash. The problem is, do we have sufficient technology services which are providing convenience to consumers? I think if we solve that problem, I think there are enough rails in the back end which will facilitate this. So I think the younger generation of fintech or so-called startups coming up need to solve problems using technology, right? My problem is not paying to the hardware shop. My problem is, how do I get a bag of cement to the house I'm building, right? And if I just order and Uber delivers that, my problem is solved. So that's a service. And would I mind paying 50 rupees for that? Certainly, because I waste my time, hire a three-wheeler and do that right now. So as long as more and more services come on board, providing convenience to consumers, they will start consuming, and from the back end, the rails will start using. So I think we need to change the line of thinking how we provide service.
So am I to understand that, and that makes absolute sense to me. But in terms of responsibility, do you think then it's not that there's the regulatory environment is not allowing for this. It's not that the banks are not ready to collaborate. It's not due to a lack of investment or anything like that. It's just that the fintechs need to, look at it from a consumer perspective and try to solve the consumer's lifestyle issues, and then see how the financial services aspect tags along with that. Is that?
I think, Shashika, the financial ecosystem need to support that by investing. Now, for example, how you fund a startup, how you fund a fintech, right? We can't look at the traditional, funding, giving them a loan and asking for collateral, right? The world is looking at P ratios and potential, future revenue and other things. So we need to also start looking at our investment models to get these guys going, because obviously when they just come up with a solution, they are not going to have a plethora of customers using them from day one. So they need to sustain for a year or two or longer. So that's a longer term investment. So I think the investment model of banks, obviously there is a risk averse community, as all of us know, banks are risk averse. But I think they need to look at this segment from a different perspective and say, what is the future potential? Because that is the future, certainly. I mean, the Gen Zs are the future. So if you don't cater to that, we are going to lose a lot of customers. They will even take their parents away to another bank or fintech who's providing that service. So we need to be afraid of this community going away from us, because we don't matter to them. We don't respect them, right? Unless we start respecting and looking at where they are going, and if we don't go along with them, certainly we will be history.
Yes, very hard-hitting facts. In fact, that we should we should immediately take steps on. Right now, we've started receiving some questions, and I would like to it's in line with some of the things that I had planned on asking as well. So one aspect, one of the questions is that with digital banking, this person thinks that there should be better customer care services to guide customers on various issues. As with more technology, it brings more complexity into the applications the customers use. And then they want to know whether the digital banking initiatives have looked at these perspectives. Now, before I channel that across to one of the bankers, I think I would like to kind of provide my perspective on that as well. Now, what is digital banking really? I think this flows in very well from what Shanna was talking about. Now, nobody taught us how to use PickMe. Nobody taught us how to, order food through Uber Eats or, PickMe or anything like that. Nobody taught us how to there was no customer service guiding us on how to book a room through Airbnb, right? And these are obviously great digital services backed by payments and digital banking underneath. So I think essentially the message is that if we are providing digital banking, the user experience has to be so awesome that there does not need to be a requirement to call the call center and get help to go through the steps. But obviously, this question is coming from some challenging experiences in possibly some of the technology that has been used in the process. And along with that, I'd like to just add on to that from something that I have been thinking about as well. When we analyze the digital banking capabilities available in the island, in Sri Lanka, it doesn't really quite match up to some of the innovation that's available in the region or globally. And more importantly, it doesn't match up to consumer requirements, because if we are getting this kind of questions, that means this digital banking process that is being rolled out is not really meeting that great consumer experience. And what we mostly see are the ability to do online transactions and payments, and at most open a fixed deposit online. If you look at some of these digital channels that current banks are providing us. Some banks have actually provided some pseudo tools that are supposed to help with financial planning, but in reality, when you try to use it, you realize that the user is expected to key in all the data about their spending and all of that, and it basically provides a basic calculation that can be done, unfortunately, on an Excel sheet. So, Mr. Bakmedeniya, I'm going to bring this to you because this is from a Sri Lankan context. What are the reasons for this? Why are we still at this stage of digital innovation? Is it a lack of investment into technology, or is it because of challenges in understanding really what the consumer requirements and demands are? Or is it some sort of regulatory limitation that is holding us back? Or is it just that the banks don't have an incentive to improve customer experience?
I think it's a mix of everything, for sure. It's a mix of everything. So, well, couple of reasons. I mean, I have experience being working in multiple financial institute banks, particularly. So, there are some legacy systems that we anyway are inherited, and we you have to live with it. So some of those solutioning probably not have the capabilities of kind of doing things faster, right? So then also about there are traditional behavior of how we engage with customers with the fairly large banks or traditional banks. So those mindsets has to be changed, right? And also how you can really improve your productivity through your internal services, right? Say if you're going to allow a credit card, for example, which is not really a digital, but if it takes a couple of days to do that, right? You haven't really, oiled your inside engine, right? But you are trying to do something else for the customer. So likewise, omni-channel experience, we talk a lot on that. But if you really go and see some of our touch points, I mean, across many organizations, it's very different, right? So you have different experience at each level. So I think it's a mix of many things. It's about legacy systems that needs to get revamped a lot, and also have the kind of the mindset that you kind of reinvest on your technology very often, like at least in a very quick cycles, right? And you also have the mindset of adopting something quickly, and you also have the mindset of failing something quickly, because a lot of these digital services might not work right. So you invest on certain things on a very conscious way, but there is also a chance that you might fail. But of course you will learn off that, and then you start reinvesting or you start redoing something. So those combinations has to come through, especially particularly for banks in their mindset, not only technology people, but banks as a large. Of course, regulator has a role to play. And I think in Sri Lankan context, I think now a lot of things are coming through from the regulator to enabling us to do the banking more digitally, focusing on that area, right? Then the other thing is what I always think is about the security and getting the confidence of individuals, right? The customers, right? So we need to be very, very much mindful about the security aspect of this, keeping awareness of the customer, making them to use the product services digitally, where they feel comfortable about it, right? So if there's a situation or a one or two situation that happens which go in an adverse effect, so people will lose a lot of credibility about the digital services. So that's where even you said, look, people need to be on the telephone call. No, I mean, those are the things that we need to really look at how we can, how we need to avoid, right? You're very rightly said, many years ago, we actually started booking online tickets, right? I mean, there's no longer there's, you don't walk into a shop or a office and book a ticket, right? You don't get those, red color ticket books. I don't think most of us have seen us for a long time. So that happened naturally, right? So I think we need to start giving those frictionless services to our customers. Particularly also, we need to be multilingual, I believe. Being in country or the culture in this region, I think we need to be catering multilingual as well, so that is also becoming very convenient for them to use. That's kind of my thinking.
Excellent. And unfortunately, I have so many questions to ask, and we are receiving some questions on the chat box as well. But the time is not with us, and it's not willing to give us that benefit of having this continuing this conversation. So I would just conclude the session, and before concluding, just provide some final remarks. I think the general understanding from the various, the different representatives of the different stakeholders in the financial ecosystem is obviously the need for digital is very real. And I think we are all aware that we all need to really step up to really meet the requirement, because we are all kind of not where we should be, both in terms of global trends and more importantly in terms of meeting the consumer requirements. And the other aspect that we discussed was to think not about how to do digital banking, but to think through how do we make services that improve people's lifestyles, and the digital banking transactions, payments will just come along with that. And finally, this about this challenge to innovate in the pace that is required. And I think one of the magic bullets, which unfortunately I was hoping to talk about a lot, was the whole ecosystem play and the digital ecosystems. where you don't really fix all these problems alone, but you create these, you partner up with several players in the ecosystem who help each other and use the core competencies of each stakeholder to really create innovation and to really fast track innovation. So I think Sri Lanka really needs to really take that on serious, the banking sector, the regulators, the fintechs, and the consumers also, to really give rise to innovation through collaboration. So on that note, right on time, 4:30, I would like to first of all thank the panelists for making your time available for this discussion and for the valuable insights you gave at this session. I would love to link up with you later on and have a hard-hitting conversation around some of the other questions that I had planned. Thank you to the attendees for participation and your questions coming through as well. Please feel free to reach out to any of us. Most of us are available on social media and continue the conversation. Thank you very much.